Alright, so this is a continuation of the first video I did where I just talked about a bunch of characters that I think should have been added to MultiVersus back when it had like an actual chance. And I kind of just want to talk more about these characters or introduce new characters that I missed because like I said in the last video, there's a lot of characters that could have been added and could have saved the game and they just missed out. Like they missed out severely because they're too stubborn. So yeah, just want to talk more about these characters and also just like talk a little bit more about like other characters that I missed. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so the first character we have is Wile E Coyote. This kind of ties back to the Daffy Duck statement I made in the last video, but I'm still kind of pissed off about this, and I also feel like he would be another good addition. Now, don't get me wrong, they did give us Lola, which I am thankful for, but it's still the fact that we got Marvin the Martian and LeBron James before we even got like Daffy, Wile E Coyote, the Roadrunner would have been interesting to see. And it's just like, y'all clearly see that he has all of this stuff. He's built all of this stuff to try and catch the Roadrunner, and y'all didn't even think about adding him into the game when you know he has all of this like really unique and interesting stuff that he could bring, especially in the Looney Tunes show where they have like those snippets of Wile E Coyote and Roadrunner, and you just see episode after episode, not even episodes, just like in the episodes themselves, you just see that he has a like large disposable inventory of just like gadgets and stuff that he could have used. So it still kind of pissed me off, and I also just think he would have been a good addition. All right, the next characters we have are pretty much the Animaniacs, you know, Yakko, Warner, and Dot. Now, to me, it feels like these characters should have been added from the start because like they were some of the tease characters that we got when the game first came back. And these characters are literally made for fighting games because they can pull out a bunch of like oversized weapons and stuff, and it would just be cool to see them. They could have like anvils, like classic cartoon fashion. They could use pies, another staple in cartoons, or even just talking. You know, like Velma has a move where she just talks and there's a bunch of speech phrases that pop up everywhere. So it would have been cool to see them. And it's one of those things where it's like they were teased at the beginning of the game and we never got it, or maybe we weren't supposed to get them, but either way, like they should have been added from the start. All right, the next characters we have are Chowder and Billy and Mandy. Now, these are more Cartoon Network characters, and I'm gonna go over a few more later, but right now, I've been seeing a lot of clips of these two being like wacky and all that, and it seems like they would also do pretty well in MultiVersus because with Chowder, you know, he could like make a lot of dishes and stuff, you know, probably use those as weapons or like healing abilities to make him a support character. And with Billy and Mandy, you know, they have Grim and like his scythe, his magic, his like summons and all that. So yeah, you know, there's a lot of stuff that they could have done with either Chowder or Billy and Mandy. And like I said, with Chowder, he probably would have been a support character. And with Billy and Mandy, they probably would have been like assassins or bruisers. But either way, it still would have been cool. And not just with them, but with more Cartoon Network characters in general. All right, the next character we have is going to be an interesting pick, but I chose Yogi Bear. Now, I chose Yogi because of one main reason, and that's to strengthen the Hanna-Barbera legacy. I mean, he probably would have been added for nostalgia purposes, but you know, outside of Shaggy and Velma, I could see why, since we didn't really have that many Hanna-Barbera reps in the game. So I feel like Yogi would have been a good choice. Since he is a ranger, he could probably a bunch of stuff like rangers are taught to do, you know, like create campfires, summon trees, like he can throw his picnic basket, you know, create a bunch of food out of it. I don't really know. I feel like he would also be a support character alongside Chowder simply because of what he can do with like his picnic basket and all the food he has. And since he is a ranger, it would make sense. So yeah, Yogi should have been added. It probably would have been for nostalgia purposes, but I still don't really care. Alright, the next characters we have are going to be the Smurfs, and I chose them because they could also be like an ice climbers or Pokemon trainer type of situation with them like having a team-based mechanic, but it still would have been cool. Like I genuinely would have picked up the Smurfs if they added them, not just for like joke purposes, but just for what they bring to the table, you know? Papa Smurf, I heard like he can do a bunch of potion based attacks since he does work with potions and stuff. So they'd probably either be a support character, be an assassin, or a bruiser. I honestly don't really know. But if Papa Smurf can create like a bunch of potions that buff or debuff characters, then that would be really useful. They can be small fighters and like dispatch themselves from the team. It's similar to like what Tom and Jerry already has now. There was a lot of potential for them. And if they had a team-based mechanic, I honestly, like I said earlier, would have picked them up. All right, the next character we have is going to be Ben 10. And I feel like a lot of people that played MultiVersus and grew up on Cartoon Network really was hoping for Ben 10 to be in the game. And I can see why. I don't really know too much about Ben 10. All I really know is that he has like the ability to turn into different aliens and stuff. But that still would have been a really good choice to put him in the game. I did mention him in my MultiVersus fumble video, and looking back on it, if they were gonna tease Dexter only for him to not be in the game, then they could have made up with Ben 10. Because you have Heat Blast that has fire abilities, Accelerate that has speed, Forearms that has like heavy hitting attacks. He would have been like a grappler or like a heavyweight like King K. Rool or DK. And Diamond Head, he has defensive abilities with crystals. That probably would have been like a Zelda situation. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they could have done with Ben 10. And it honestly would have helped like the Cartoon Network legacy in MultiVersus, because we didn't really get that much stuff from Cartoon Network and MultiVersus outside of stuff like Looney Tunes and Teen Titans. So Ben 10 probably would have helped. All right, the next characters we have are going to be Godzilla and King Kong. And I'm honestly surprised MultiVersus never even thought to like bring them in the game, because with the movies and stuff that they have, there was a lot of potential. And if they ever were stuck on like designing moves and stuff, the movies would have been perfect. They could have pulled so much stuff from the movies and used them in the game. So with Godzilla, you have his tail, obviously. He could have used his tail for a bunch of different moves. And with King Kong, he could have just used raw strength. And these two, they probably would have been heavies as well, since, you can't really have a fast heavyweight character. That doesn't really end well most of the time. But outside of that, I forget which one had the axe in the movie, but you're going to see it when I put like B-roll over this. But one of them could have the axe to help them. And like I said earlier, I'm honestly surprised MultiVersus never even thought to bring one of them in. I think I did see that they were trying to bring Godzilla in at some point. I'm honestly surprised they never thought to prioritize him first. Alright, the next character we have is Popeye the Sailor. Now, this is one of my personal favorites. I honestly think it would have been funny to see Popeye because of one thing that we all know him for, the spinach. Popeye's spinach probably would have been like a power-up thing, kind of like Shaggy's Ultra Instinct, and it could have worked. It could have worked. They could have found some way to use the spinach. If not the spinach, they probably would have used like an anchor or something, since he is a sailor. It could have been like that one scene in SpongeBob where he's like throwing the anchor and stuff. If not the spinach or the anchor, he could just be melee fighter, just throw punches and stuff. Or he could have used olive oil for some of his attacks. It would have been cool to see olive oil being brought back, even if it was for like a few moves in the game. But I honestly think Popeye would have been cool. Alright, the next character we have is going to be anyone from the Harry Potter universe. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Harry Potter, and honestly don't really know like that much about Harry Potter. All I know is like they have the ability to create different spells and stuff. And to me, if you can create spells off the top of your head, or if you're just associated with magic in general, then you're pretty much the cheat code to being in a fighting game, because I don't know if there's really like that many restrictions in the Harry Potter universe, but if you have the ability to use magic and create spells, you literally have the ability to create anything. So I'm honestly surprised MultiVersus didn't even think of that, because like I said, they literally have the ability to create anything off the top of their head. But maybe I'm tripping. I don't really know that much about Harry Potter, so I'm gonna need some of y'all in the comments to help me out. Alright, the next characters we have is gonna also be an interesting choice, but I chose We Bare Bears. Now, this is a show I personally grew up with, and I remember seeing a lot of stuff that they did in the show that just made me think they were never going to add them to begin with. But if MultiVersus did add We Bare Bears into the game, I feel like it would have made sense low-key, because all of the bears having something unique to them. Ice Bear, he's the coldest one out of all of them. We saw Ice Bear use martial arts abilities in a lot of the episodes, so maybe he can use that. Panda, I know there was an episode where he got braces and then took control of like electricity and plastic and stuff, so it'd be cool if they referenced that for some of his moves. And Grizz, he has the burrito, so it would have been cool if they referenced the burrito, because that was one of my favorite episodes. I don't know if they really would want to go in like a team-based mechanic, I don't really know if they would want to go in like a team-based mechanic type of direction, since like they're pretty big enough to the point where they can be their own fighters, but it still would have been cool if at least one of them made it. If I had to guess who would make it out of all three of them, it would probably be Ice Bear. Alright, the next character we have is Fred Flintstone, and I chose him specifically because just like Yogi Bear, he would also help like strengthen the Hanna-Barbera legacy, and outside of like just legacy wise, he would be a good fighter because we see him using the bowling ball in almost every form of media that references the Flintstones. He can use like a club that a bunch of cavemen have used in the past. He can use his pet dinosaur. I don't know how they would incorporate a dinosaur, but it'd still be pretty cool. Maybe the dinosaur would be a heavyweight type of character with their own attacks, maybe like a Rosalina and Luma type of situation. But if not that, he can use his car that we see. He can just throw like a bunch of different rocks, and yeah, I just think he would be a pretty funny and like cool fighter. I kind of wish they added Fred Flintstone, but it is what it is. And the last characters we have are some characters I talked about in the last video, but I kind of want to go like more into detail on these characters. We have the Injustice characters again, and there are 6 characters I really would have liked to see: the Flash, Bane, Red X, Nightwing, Robin, and Cyborg. I know Red X isn't an Injustice character, he's a Teen Titans character, but at the very least he could have been like a Robin skin, if not his own character. But the 3 characters I would have liked to see the most are Flash, Bane, and Cyborg. You know, Cyborg, we already have Raven. It would have been cool to see Cyborg being added, you know, also representing the Teen Titans. And the Flash and Bane, I really was disappointed that we didn't get the Flash because since the game speed was brought down by a significant amount, his speed probably would have saved the game. He would have been a fun character to play. And then Bane, he most likely would have been a tank character, and his venom probably would have helped him in matches and stuff like that. So yeah, but I'm still hung over on the Flash. And like I said, if he was added since the game speed was brought down, he would have made the game fun. And that's all the characters. That's pretty much every single character, part 1 and 2, that I think should have been added to Multiverses. It's sad to see the game die, but like I keep saying in the last video and the Multiversus Fumble video, go check that video out. They pretty much did this to themselves. You know, they didn't want to listen, so this is what they ended up with. I have another Multiversus video planned. It's going to be a tier list, so stick around for that. That's going to be the last Multiversus video I make if the game does come back by some miracle, but I highly doubt the game's coming back after this. But anyways, I'm gonna end it right here. What character did you want in Multiversus? And with that, Zayzaz out.